Our collusion and corruption segment tonight. New information on the Trump dossier and Fusion GPS, the firm responsible for putting together the Trump dossier. According to these reports, the conservative website, the Washington Free Beacon, initially commissioned Fusion GPS to conduct anti-Trump opposition research during the primaries. Now, the Washington Free Beacon was known for being anti-Trump in the primaries, so it's not surprising that they would look into Trump's background. They say they did opposition research on other candidates, too. But why Fusion GPS when the firm is known to be sketchy and known for its ties to the Democratic Party? Do we really want news organizations hiring opposition research firms to dig up dirt on candidates they don't like? With me now, media and breaking news reporter at the Daily Caller, Athey. Amber, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Liz.
All right, Amber, I have to say, when this report broke initially, and this was broken by the Washington Free Beacon themselves, they issued a statement about it. I was pretty surprised. I expected one of the other primary candidates, one of the other Republican candidates, to have been the one to pay for this before Hillary Clinton did.
I was really surprised as well. I was definitely expecting something along the lines of maybe a Jeb Bush or a Marco Rubio, certainly not another news outlet. And this certainly raises questions as to their credibility, because throughout the time that this dossier was floating around, the Washington Free Beacon was reporting on Fusion GPS without ever mentioning their connection to the firm. And the Daily Caller also did a report noting that their coverage of the Russian dossier was a lot slimmer than a lot of the other conservative news outlets. So the signs were kind of there, but most people didn't realize that, you know, there are news outlets that contract with these outside firms to do opposition research. But in this case, it's definitely interesting because, as you mentioned, Fusion GPS is known for having these sketchy ties to foreign agents, and also for just putting out things that are blatantly false.
Right, and I guess that would be my question. That was my initial question when I heard this, is it normal for news organizations, and I guess smaller news organizations that don't have the man on the street power that some of the larger organizations might, is it normal for them to pay for opposition research like this?
There are some that do, but again, like I mentioned, if you're not disclosing that when you're reporting on those firms that are doing the research, it definitely calls into question your credibility. I think the distinction here, though, that's really important to note is that the Free Beacon, as reported, did stop paying Fusion GPS before this dossier was created. The dossier did not come into question. The Fusion GPS did not contract with the ex-British agent Christopher Steele until the DNC and the Clinton campaign were paying for that research. So at the very least, we know that the Washington Free Beacon was not involved in gathering the information that went into the dossier and was not involved in gathering information that may have come from Russian sources.
Right, and it's a very important distinction to make. It's a huge difference, actually, between paying for Fusion to do opposition research for yourself or paying them to do opposition research, which they subcontracted to Christopher Steele, which was later included in the dossier. The Washington Free Beacon themselves, they say that none of their opposition research, none of the information they were given by Fusion GPS was included in that dossier. We have no reason not to believe them at this point, especially because they're going to have to testify in front of Congress about this, and I assume Congress will see this information. So if they lied, it seems that it would trip them up. There's no reasonable reason why they would lie at this point. The political aspect of this, though, let me ask you about this, Amber. So the editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon, a higher-up in this organization, is married to the daughter of Bill Kristol. Now, Bill Kristol was very outspoken about being anti-Trump during the primaries. He's known as, you know, one of the higher-ups in the hierarchy of never-Trumpers. Did this play a role? Was this a factor in the Washington Free Beacon hiring a known smear merchant to go after opposition research to get stuff on Trump?
It's definitely a possibility, and it's more of what we see where these more liberal-leaning or even just anti-Trump news outlets are willing to, you know, bring on these anti-Trump Republicans. I call them the rational Republicans, because MSNBC and CNN will only bring on these anti-Trump Republicans pretty much to try and further the liberal narrative. And unfortunately, it seems that this has trickled into conservative media, with the Washington Free Beacon having those ties to anti-Trumpers who are desperate to get this information against Trump. We kind of have to take them at their word that they say they were also gaining opposition research on other candidates as well. But based on the fact that they just contracted with Fusion GPS that also ended up being paid by the DNC and by the Clinton campaign, it certainly raises questions about what exactly their motivations were, and can we really trust them on their reporting about Trump in the future?
Right, and it just brings me back to that question, why Fusion GPS? I mean, this entity is known to be a smear merchant. They're known to have ties to the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign. Why them? And then why keep this a secret until now? If they did nothing wrong, if they just hired out, if they just subcontracted opposition research for their own reporting, because that's what they do, they break news. If they just subcontracted this out, why keep this a secret that they paid for this until this point?
That's exactly right. And now the Free Beacon is in trouble because you have liberals conflating the payment to Fusion GPS with the funding of the Dossier. Just this morning on MSNBC, Senator Tim Kaine, who was on the Clinton campaign, he was her running mate, said that it was actually the Free Beacon who was the first one to fund the Dossier and that his campaign didn't come in until much later, basically distancing himself from possibly gathering information from Russian agents. So now that the Free Beacon has been silent on this, now they have to backtrack and say, well, we didn't fund the Dossier, we were just paying for normal opposition research. But coming out this late in the game and saying that is definitely a little bit fishy, and it makes them look not as credible.
Right, well, it just comes off as defensive, even though, like we just covered, that distinction is important. I've invited the editors of the Washington Free Beacon to come on this show and talk to us about this. I promised to ask them fair questions. The people want to know. I think it's important that we do know who funded this and why. As of yet, they have declined to come on the show, but put some pressure on them. We'd like to have them on the show. We'd like to talk to them. Amber, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.